Horace slept under the stars that night. As the cool, free air kissed his skin, he realized he hadn't felt the need to bathe since reaching this side of the wall. Oh, sure, he was dirty from the ride out, you bet. But it was different than the city. Back there, it was in the water, soaked into the ground. It sprayed through the mist in the air. It got on you, in you. Out here, it was no more than a thin layer of crud. And Horace didn't feel the need to scrub his skin raw before drifting into a deep and restful sleep. It was the smell of bacon and coffee that woke him. The old woman was hunched over the fire pit and lifting the lid of a cast-iron pot. Steam erupted from under the lid, and through it, Horace spied the golden brown of biscuits. His stomach groaned painfully, and he held his belly through his shirt. It scared him at first. He hadn't felt the pain of hunger in, well, he didn't know how long.
"Good morning, lazy bones,"
the widow chimed as he rose.
"I've made breakfast."
"I smell it," Horace said, surprised by the depth of his sense.
"Smells better than the slop you eat on the hill, eh?"
Horace cleaned his plate and left none to waste. Scrambled eggs, smoked pork sausage, biscuits, and coffee to boot. He ate every bite and even got a second helping. He had begun the morning with a stomach screaming, but by the time he was finished, it was moaning from having its fill. He leaned back on the widow's guest chair and breathed a big sigh, and wondered how many people had ever felt such peace. He supposed there weren't many. Most people lock themselves in little boxes behind tall walls, lost somewhere in a maze, and think that that's their peace. How many were as lucky as he to have been born of this simple life outside those walls? It wasn't new to him. It was the oldest thing he knew, and it was comforting to return to it. It was home. Home. Treacherous thing, that word. Horace's mind drifted from the sweet smell of biscuits and thick-cut bacon to another idea of home. A different time. Sunlight broke over the chimneys and smokestacks of the city in the same dull spill as always. The soot in the air made it amber, almost gentle, if you squinted. Horace buttoned his vest in the mirror. His mustache was trimmed, his hair was slicked, his suit was pinstriped. Clean lines on a clean man. He looked into the mirror and he felt respectable, the kind of man people trusted with keys and paper, and he smiled. The raspy sound of a cough came from the bedroom. Horace turned from the mirror and stepped into the bedroom doorway. She was bundled beneath the blankets, the faded quilt pulled up to her chest, a pencil in hand. A pad of paper rested on her knees as she drew with sluggish concentration. Her hair was wild and unbrushed, cheeks flushed, faintly pink, not from the sun, but from the fever that had kept her in bed the past day. Beside her, propped up against the pillow, sat her doll, both button eyes bright and staring. Horace sat on the edge of the bed with her and pressed a hand to her forehead. She was still warm.
"Must you go, Dad?"
she asked in the way children ask questions they already know the answer to, like they're hoping you'll prove them wrong. Horace kissed the crown of her head. "I'm afraid I must, love. Stay in bed. Mum will be back from the market shortly, and I'll be home before supper."
"You promise?"
"I promise." She smiled weakly at him, satisfied, and went back to her drawing, her free hand absent-mindedly tugging the doll a little closer. The doll. He left the goddamn doll behind. He felt the weight of rot wash over him like it had never left to begin with. It was only for an instant, but it jerked him back from the widow's home. He could still smell the bacon in the air, and his belly still hurt, but there was something different there now. A knowing, almost. The chalk widow sat across the fire pit in her rusty chair, eyes glued to Horace, like an owl watching a mouse. He didn't need to say anything to her. He could see in her eyes that she already knew what fool thought had occurred to him. "I've got to go back, boy," he whispered. Billy grumbled and nudged Horace's chest with his nose. Horace ran his fingers through his mane. "You shouldn't have to go back there, old boy. It's not a place for a spirit like you." Billy managed to make a snort sound offended.
"I won't be gone long. There's something I have to do." "'Tis the errand of a damn fool, if you ask me," said the widow.
She stood in the midday sun, hands on her hips, spoons in her hat glinting in the light. He couldn't recall her ever being so tender with her words before. She must have softened in her old age. "His name's Billy," Horace said as he held the reins, "and he likes apples. Would you watch him for me until I return?" She squinted at him and bit her lip, and then she stepped close and took the reins.
"Billy, is it? Always did want me a horse of me own."
She looked up at Horace with a plea in her eyes.
"You should let this go."
"I mean to." Horace moved through the rows of desks with a stack of reports in one arm, stiff as a fence post in a sea of noise.
"Horace!"
Miss Catherly's voice cut through the clamor. She didn't look up as she bustled past with a clipboard and a fountain pen tucked behind one ear.
"Cormac needs those edits now,"
she said.
"And mind the margins this time. Last week's lot looked like they were typed by drunkards."
"Right," he muttered sheepishly, and adjusted his grip on the stack.
"Oh, and if you see Mr. Bigham, tell him he left his teeth in the washroom again."
A few chuckles ripped through the office, and Horace smirked. "That's the third time this week. Pretty soon they'll have to get their own desk." More laughter came now. Miss Catherly did not break stride.
"Don't tempt him."
Horace grinned to himself and kept walking, the reports tucked under one arm like they might bite if he let them go. It wasn't noon when the sound came. A low groan, deep and distant, like the city exhaled through gritted teeth. It was followed by a soft crack, and then a second, sharper, like distant beams snapping under strain. Then came the quake. A jolt ran through the floor, sharp enough to rattle the glass in the windows and knock a stack of ledgers off a nearby desk. For one stunned moment, the room fell silent, and no one breathed. And then, the smell. Something sour, fungal, sharp and wet, like mildew and rot stirred in a hot kettle. Someone near the window gasped.
"Oh my saints, is that the bowl?"
Horace crossed the office, heart pounding in his chest as he joined the crowd gathering at the high windows. Out past the narrow streets and brick roofs, where the slums of the bowl should have been, there was only a sunken shadow, a depression in the skyline. A new mouth had opened in the city, wide and deep. Horace turned without a word and made for the stairs. He took them two at a time. People had already gathered in the street, pointing and whispering, holding handkerchiefs to their faces as sewer gas rose up from storm drains and manholes in short, sharp hisses. Horace pushed through the crowd, moving towards the center of the street, toward the edge, and there it was. The block where his flat stood. Gone. Not destroyed, not burned. Swallowed. The roofs were just gone. The ground had caved in, collapsed in a slow spiral of filth and stone. A sludge of black water and debris still churned at the bottom, like something was digesting this place. And the worst part, it was quiet. Water bubbled from the sewer grates and sloshed over Horace's shoes. A single page from one of his reports flapped loose in the wind, curling down into the pit like a feather into a grave. Horace climbed the stairwell slow, boots scraping on damp wood. The smell of piss and mildew was more rank than usual. The squatters and beggars, curled in corners, stood when they saw him. Some shrank away, others cursed under their breath. The floor writhed. Not just rats now. Bugs, centipedes, beetles, pale things without names. They scattered when the light shifted, but there were too many to hide them all. A toothless woman with a ratty shawl waved a stick at the floor, shooing them away like stray dogs.
"Oi, you got a real infestation in there. I've a mind to write the landlord a bloody letter."
Her words bounced off the rotten walls. Someone chuckled nearby. Horace didn't look at her. He walked straight ahead, pale and hollow-eyed, until he reached his door. The knob was warm to the touch, greasy. It was the smell that hit him first as the door creaked open. A wave of heat, damp and rank, like meat left too long in a broken pipe. It clung to his throat and made his eyes sting. And then the sound, the low, wet ripple of things moving in the dark. Bugs and rats spilled over the threshold like a flood of refuse, skittering between his boots and pouring down the steps. The toothless woman shrieked and pressed herself to the stair rail, one hand over her mouth.
"Oh, mother mine! Burn the fucking thing down!"
Horace was terrified. His home, his safe haven from all things gruesome, had been overrun by skittering creatures. He felt like he might faint, and he probably would have if it weren't for the toothless woman's hand shoving him forward. He didn't want to go in there. Why had he come back here? Why couldn't he have just stayed outside the walls? Horace took a deep breath and stepped deep into the nest. The door clicked shut behind him. The air was thick, humid like a bathhouse, just heat and stink. His boots sank into layers of shed skin, droppings and husks. Something crunched under every footfall. They climbed him without hesitation. Little legs of insects skirted up his calves, claws caught in his pant legs, and pincers nipped at the sweat on his skin. A fat cockroach disappeared into his collar. Horace shut his eyes and tried to breathe as the rot crawled over him. He needed to let go. He knew that to be true. He stepped through the murk and mass, past walls that pulsed like something breathing. And then he found it, the doll. It sat on the table beside the bed, right where he'd left it. Button eye and empty socket, staring him down like it had always been watching. The cloth was darker now, stained with filth and damp. He plucked it from the table. Threads gave way beneath his fingers and insects fell from its stuffing in clumps. He turned for the door, and the rats followed. Bugs poured from the walls, spilling through cracks, slipping under the floorboards, chasing him, not out of fear, but as if compelled, as if he were the shepherd, and they his flock. By the time he reached the stairwell, the squatters and vagrants had already caught the sound and the scent. They screamed and scattered, shoving one another, scrambling for the exit. Boots thundered down the stairs, curses and pleas tumbling over each other. Horace walked slow. Bugs dripped from his coat, and rats darted between his steps, never touching him, but never straying far. Outside in the sour evening air, the vagrants burst into the street first, wide-eyed and filthy, shouting of demons and curses. And then the vermin poured out, a black river of rats, beetles, and centipedes, all writhing and squealing and clicking. Then Horace emerged, doll dangling from his hand like a dead thing. Civilians across the street screamed and stumbled back. A fruit vendor dropped his cart in his rush to flee, apples rolling into the gutters. A blackcoat stood slack-jawed, hand on his baton but not moving, not daring to intervene. It was Officer McShaw.
"God's preserve,"
McShaw muttered, eyes wide as dinner plates. And somewhere, a woman hitched up her skirts and clicked away on her heels. Another doubled over and retched into the gutter as Horace passed. Horace didn't look at any of them. He just kept walking, the doll swaying at his side and the horde of vermin trailing dutifully behind. His street was a massive and waterlogged ruin. There was screaming all around him. Men shouted for their wives, women cried for their babies, and babies screamed for their parents. The whole block had collapsed, like a rotten tooth yanked from the gums of the city. The buildings had sunk, tipped inward, twisted, and broken at the spine. Brick, glass, wood, and plaster lay in a gaping pit where the world had once stood. The earth had swallowed his home whole. As his eyes darted from one blurry face to another, he eventually found one he recognized. Her dress was torn, blood streaked down her arms, her hands were raw from digging, and her eyes, oh, he'd never forget the terrified, frantic pain in those red eyes. Laura.
"She was home!"
She screamed, clutching at his coat.
"Maria was home, Horace. I left her."
Horace moved toward the barricade. Blackcoats were shouting and forming lines. Rescue workers were calling down into the rubble. They pulled out the wounded and the dead. A stretcher passed by, carrying a man with no legs. Horace didn't wait. The chasm was still unstable. The water down at the bottom bubbled through what remained of the buildings. But he joined the rescue efforts. He went down that deep hole they couldn't see the bottom of. He dug with bare hands through splintered beams and crumbling brick, breath burning in his lungs. He didn't eat, he didn't rest. He thought of nothing else but an image in his head of his little girl, coughing and crying and wondering what had happened to her. Where was her father? She needed him, and he couldn't find her. There was a man to his left, coat long and black, the brass of his badge dulled by mud. Officer McShaw. He was elbow deep in the rubble with him, hands torn and bleeding, his eyes wild with panic. Their eyes met once, and a look passed between them. Not words, and certainly not comfort. Just the simple truth they both knew. Someone they loved was under there. And then came a voice, small, muffled beneath the rubble. Together, Horace and McShaw cleared the wreckage brick by brick until they unearthed her. A mud-covered girl, her face streaked in grime, eyes blinking against the lantern light. He dragged her free himself, cradling her to his chest. Her hair was matted and tangled with plaster and dust, but alive. "Papa," she whispered weakly. Horace's heart caught in his throat. He brushed the dirt from her face, hands trembling. But the eyes that blinked back at him were blue, not brown. McShaw looked over at Horace as he cradled the girl. He didn't have to say it. Horace already knew. She wasn't McShaw's either. Horace could see his own thoughts reflected in McShaw's eyes. If the devil himself had come and offered a deal for their children's lives in exchange for this one's, they'd have smothered her where she lay. But the devil didn't show. The girl shivered in Horace's arms. She was safe and alive, but she wasn't his Maria. 3 days he spent in that pit. He didn't stop digging, not when his hands split, not when his nails peeled back, not when the sun sank and the lamps burned low and all the night grew silent again. Under the dim light of a fading lantern, Horace searched like a man possessed. He wouldn't stop. He didn't know how to. Until, through the rubble, he felt something soft. It was her doll. Filthy little face. One button eye had fallen away. Horace clutched it to his chest, and he did not let it go. And though it wasn't by his hand, and though it wasn't by his choice, his little girl was the first he'd ever fed to the darkness. The rest, he told himself, came easier. The chasm yawned wide as a canyon at his feet, and warm, wet, rancid air wafted up over him like breath from a sleeping beast. The stench was worse than the sewers, feral and alive. The kind that sank into your lungs and made your tongue taste of copper. Horace stood at the edge. He stifled a wet sob at the back of his throat, and a roach shuddered over his knuckles as he held the doll out over the pit. He could hear Maria's voice, soft like a memory slipping away. Maybe it was just his mind, or maybe it was the maw whispering to him, wearing her voice like a borrowed coat. The wind caught the doll and made it sway. Horace's grip loosened. Then a calm washed over him. He felt he could drop it, could walk away this time. He could feel her. It felt like a hug. "I made you a promise," he said, and felt his grip tighten on the doll's arm. "I can't keep it, my love. I'm sorry." Horace took a deep breath and let it go. It fell down that dark pit and disappeared. That's what he wanted to do. And he almost did. Then his fist closed tight. He pulled the doll back and tucked it into his jacket pocket, snug against his chest like something precious. And then he climbed down, hands on cold stone, feet slipping in the soft, wet earth. Bones shifted beneath his boots. The pit swallowed him slow, and the vermin followed, and they slipped in behind him, tails and legs and wings stirring in the muck. All traces of the surface vanished. All that remained was the sound of his breath, the scrape of his descent, and the feeling that he was finally going home. Hello again, travelers. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to some of the new faces that I see around this fire. Your subscriptions and your follows on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, they mean the world to me. They keep this show running. We're growing slowly, but y'all are the first, and I truly believe this will carry on and become something much, much bigger. And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for being a part of it. If you're a fan and you want more, you can find From Shallow Graves on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss what comes next. And if you're a little like me, you ain't got much patience. So, if you'd rather not wait, click the link in my bio, where you can find links to all forms of social media regarding From Shallow Graves, including Patreon, where you can get early access to every episode, and a behind-the-scenes look at what all goes into the making of this show. If you've got stories to tell and you want them told here, feel free to join our Reddit community, where you might just be able to share your own story by this very fire. Today's episode was written and performed by Red Edwards. From Shallow Graves is produced by Smug Rust Studios. Until we meet again, traveler, keep your lantern lit, because remember, we ain't alone out here.